Somewhere in your kitchen right now, there's a label that lists every single thing inside your food. You've never read it. Nobody reads it. But that boring little label exists because for decades, food companies were poisoning you. They knew it. And the only reason they stopped is 12 guys in bow ties who agreed to eat poison in a basement until somebody paid attention. This is a true story, and it starts with the worst Christmas dinner in American history. It's December 25, 1902. You're a young man in your 20s, sitting at a genuinely nice dinner table in Washington, D.C. White tablecloth, silver settings, starched collar, bow tie, because it's 1902, and you dressed like a butler to do literally anything. A menu gets passed around. It reads, applesauce, borax, soup, borax, turkey, borax, borax. Borax is on the menu twice in a row. Not a typo. A course. Borax is the stuff you buy today to kill ants. You are about to eat it with your turkey. On Christmas. On purpose. And here's the part that should genuinely concern you. You volunteered. There was a waiting list. Grown men wrote letters to the government, begging for a seat at this table. The pay is $5 a month, plus free meals, and the meals are the poison. That's the whole compensation package. Oh, and before every meal, you strip completely naked so a government scientist can weigh you. Twice a week, you hand a man with a clipboard jars of, we'll say, samples, so he can document everything your body does with the poison. This is your life. You applied for it. So the obvious question is why? Why is the federal government running a very polite poisoning operation in the basement of the Department of Agriculture? Because this basement is the only place in the entire United States where anyone, anywhere, is checking what's actually in food. That's not an exaggeration. There is no FDA. There are no ingredient labels. There are no rules. If a company wants to dye spoiled peas bright green with copper, they can. If they want to stretch milk with water and whiten it back up with chalk, they can. If they want to preserve your meat with embalming fluid, they can. Which means everybody outside this basement is eating the exact same chemicals these 12 men are eating. The only difference between you and the poison squad is that the poison squad got a menu. And the companies doing this weren't breaking any law, because there was no law. Wiley's radical, dangerous, controversial demand, the thing that made powerful men hate him for decades, was this: tell people what's in the food. That's it. That was the extremist position in 1902. A label. But when Wiley said these chemicals might be hurting people, industry had a comeback. Prove it. Nobody had ever actually tested what these preservatives do inside a human being. So in 1902, Congress handed Wiley $5,000. And Wiley did the most straightforward, most deranged thing a scientist can do. Fine. We'll test them. On people. On purpose. He posted a call for volunteers and picked 12 healthy young clerks from the department. Wiley gave the project a name so boring it loops back around to being suspicious: the hygienic table trials. The newspapers took one look at what was actually happening in that basement and gave it the name that stuck: the Poison Squad. The system worked like this. The men ate every meal at Wiley's table. Some got clean food. Some got food laced with the chemical being tested. The groups switched, so everyone got their turn being the lab rat. Doses started small and ratcheted up. And everything the men's bodies did got measured, weighed, sampled, and written down. First chemical up: borax. Wiley picked it because it was everywhere and considered relatively safe, which tells you something about the plan for the chemicals coming later. Keep that in mind. And almost immediately, the experiment ran into a problem Wiley had not planned for. His test subjects were not idiots. The men started noticing a metallic taste. They figured out the borax was hiding in the butter. Then the milk. Then wherever Wiley's staff moved it next. And they just quietly stopped eating whichever dish was poisoned that day. The great government poison study was being defeated by guys going, "No thanks," and passing the butter. So Wiley gave up on hiding it. New system. The poison goes in a capsule. You swallow the capsule at dinner, and a staff member watches your throat to make sure it went down. Which means the most scientifically rigorous food study in American history was 12 men in bow ties being supervised like toddlers taking medicine. Slowly, the borax started winning anyway. Headaches, stomach aches, appetites dying. By that Christmas dinner from the beginning, the men were losing weight on the fattest eating day of the year. And the newspapers noticed. Washington reporters had fallen in love with this story and were covering the basement like a sports team. By May 1903, the men had been at it for months. And when summer heat hit Washington, the borax table had enough. They went on strike. 12 men who volunteered to eat poison for $5 a month collectively decided that this particular poison, in this particular weather, was where they drew the line. Wiley had to negotiate. With his own lab rats, he got 7 of them to keep going and ended the borax trial early. Final verdict on borax: headaches, stomach pain, digestive damage. Not great, but survivable. And remember, borax was the safe one. It was the warm-up. Because Wiley's list had barely started. And every chemical after this one gets worse. The next one made the men bleed on the inside. Wiley's list of chemicals to test was long, and he had ordered it like a horror movie. Easiest first. Next up after borax, salicylic acid. That name sounds scary, but you actually know its family. It's a cousin of aspirin. The stuff in pimple cream. Companies were dumping it into food as a preservative, and the thinking was, how bad could aspirin's cousin be? Here's how bad. The men's stomachs started bleeding. Internal bleeding. From food. And remember, these are healthy young men in their 20s, eating carefully measured doses, with a doctor checking them twice a week. The average American family eating this stuff every day had none of that. They just had a stomachache they couldn't explain. Forever. Then came sodium sulfite. Wiley didn't even finish that test. Halfway through, the men were doing badly enough that he shut it down. When the guy running the poison experiment says, "Okay, that's enough poison, that's data too." Then sodium benzoate. 12 men started that trial. By the end, only 3 were still healthy enough or willing enough to keep eating. 9 tapped out. And I want to be clear about who these men were. These were the volunteers. The ones who wrote letters begging to get in. The ones who ate borax for a year. These were the tough ones. And benzoate sent 3 out of every 4 of them home. Which brings us to the last chemical. The one from the beginning of this video. The one in the meat. Formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is embalming fluid. Its actual job, its purpose on this earth is to stop dead bodies from rotting. Somewhere along the way, the meat industry looked at that and decided it might work on dinner. It went in the milk too, by the way. Formaldehyde in milk was common enough that it had a nickname on the street. They called the milk embalmed. Wiley saved formaldehyde for near the end of the trials because he knew, and he was right to be scared. That test ended early, faster than the others, because the men got too sick to continue. This is the chemical that beat the poison squad. The one group of guys in America who ate poison professionally, as a job with a salary. And formaldehyde was where their bodies said no. Every one of these chemicals was in regular food, sold in regular stores to regular people, legally. So Wiley now had 5 years of proof, stacks of it. Men had bled for it. Literally, all he had to do was show America. And this is where the story stops being about poison and starts being about money. Because the food companies had seen all of this coming, and they had a plan for Dr. Wiley. The food companies were not going to let a basement full of clerks end a very profitable arrangement. And their counterattack was smart. They didn't deny the chemicals were in the food. They argued the chemicals were fine, that Wiley was a fanatic, and that his little dinner table wasn't real science. And the frustrating part? They had ammunition. Years passed. The report stalled. Wiley blamed politics. His critics blamed bad science. Either way, America still didn't know what was in its food. But Wiley had 2 things the companies couldn't buy back. The first was the newspapers. Reporters had turned the poison squad into a running national story. Poems, songs, a slogan on the dining room wall, "None but the brave can eat the fair." Congress can ignore a chemist. Congress cannot ignore 5 years of front pages. The second was an ally from inside the enemy camp, the Heinz Company. Yes, ketchup Heinz. They had bet their whole brand the other way. In 1902, they reworked their ketchup to ditch the chemical preservatives and use vinegar instead. Then they stood next to Wiley and said, "If we can make food without poison, everyone can." Nothing terrifies an industry like one of its own breaking ranks and making money doing it. And then, a novelist finished the job. In 1906, Upton Sinclair published The Jungle, a book about Chicago's meatpacking plants, so disgusting that America read it and collectively threw up. Wiley had spent 5 years building the case. Sinclair made the country furious enough to act on it. That same year, the dam broke. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act. Theodore Roosevelt signed it. For the first time in American history, lying about what was in food was a federal crime. And the agency enforcing it, Wiley's own Bureau of Chemistry, would eventually grow into something you know. Today, we call it the FDA. 12 guys in bow ties, eating borax in a basement, are why the FDA exists. Now, if this were a movie, it ends there. It's not a movie. So here's the uncomfortable part. The men of the Poison Squad got $5 a month, and before their first bite, every one of them signed away the right to sue if the experiment wrecked them. No follow-up studies. No tracking what those years of chemicals did to them at 40, at 50. We know their symptoms in perfect detail, urine sample by urine sample, right up until the day they stopped being useful. After that, nobody wrote anything down. And Wiley? Winning the law was the last fight he won clean. When he tried to use it against sodium benzoate, the one that knocked out 9 of his 12 men, the government convened a fancier panel of scientists, which overruled him. Benzoate was declared safe in small doses. Wiley eventually got boxed out of his own agency and quit. Oh, and sodium benzoate? Check a soda bottle. Seriously, if there's one within reach, grab it and read the ingredients. I'll wait. There's a decent chance it's in there. Legal. Approved. Considered safe at today's tiny doses. And to be fair, dose is the whole game in chemistry. But that's the real ending. Not the poison. The label. The chemicals didn't disappear. The lying did. Mostly. Every ingredient list you've never bothered to read is a receipt from this fight. 12 names long. Written by men who ate embalmed beef so that the law would have to admit what dinner was. The label doesn't say any of that. It just sits there, on everything you own, quietly assuming you'd like to know.